What's going on, guys, and welcome back. I got my helper today. We're going to be working on the Tacoma. I want to get my fuel lines ran. The other thing I want to do is get my new core support. I actually bought a new core support, so I want to get that installed. That way I can mount my radiator and hopefully try and figure out what I'm going to do for my upper and lower radiator hoses. And then hopefully we can get a few other things done, but I think that's a good start. So let's get after it. Alright, so I may have mentioned it before in another video, but all I'm doing is installing a Corvette style fuel filter, which is also a regulator on those cars. And so I'll just have my fuel inlet that's going to come in, and what I'll do is I'll mount this somewhere close to the fuel tank so I don't have to run my return line very far. You know, I'll have return line coming back off the filter, back to the tank, and then off the end of it, I'll have my fuel feed going all the way up to my fuel rail. So let's get our fuel pump module back up out of the tank, because what I'm going to have to do is drill some holes, because I decided to run a bigger size fuel line. So I'm going to drill some holes and install some bulkhead fittings, and then run my lines up to my regulator and then up to the fuel rail. I think what I'm going to do is set this out in the sun and let all this liquid fuel evaporate, so that whenever I'm cutting this and making sparks, I don't blow myself up. So while that thing is drying, let's go ahead and get this thing jacked up, get underneath of it, and get our fuel pressure regulator installed. What are you doing, dude? What are you doing? Can you help me jack up the truck? Huh? You can help me? Yeah, push it under. Right about there. Alright, good, let's pump it up. Pump it up. We're going to tighten it up. Alright, pump it. Pump it. Pump it, watch yourself. Pump it. Pump it. Alright. Ready? Pump it up, dude. Look. It's going up. Alright, so I think what we're going to do, our fuel tank's right here. I'm going to mount my fuel filter somewhere in this area here, mount it to the frame, and then we only have to run our fuel return maybe, I don't know, a foot or so, and then we just run our fuel feed all the way up to the fuel rail and we're done. So let's go ahead and find a good spot to mount it. There's actually a threaded hole here, so probably just use that. So let's go ahead and do that now. Sweet, should be perfect. Alright, so now the fuel module's dry, let's go ahead and cut these ends off so that we can install our bulkhead fittings. Alright, so I got my bulkhead fittings installed, and all I did here was I ran some rubber fuel line down to the pump, and I ran another rubber fuel line. That's my return. I just kind of have it zip tied here. So then what I'll do is I actually have nylon fuel line that I'm going to run, and I'm going to attach that to here and here, run them to my regulator, and then all the way up to the fuel rail. Alright, so what we're going to do here is I have nylon fuel line, which in my opinion is the better route to go. AN fuel line is super expensive, and really I don't really see a good reason to use it in most applications. I mean, it looks nice and everything, but it's stupid expensive. So we're going to use this nylon line and just quick disconnects. And how this works is you kind of heat this up a little bit, and you push it onto here with a clamp, and all this is just a band clamp that you use a pair of these crimps, and then you crimp the clamp down and you're good to go. Alright guys, so I was having some issues running that fuel line because the bulkhead fittings that I was using, because they came straight up out of the module, when I would run the lines down and around, the line wanted to kink. That stuff, it's really nice stuff, but you're not able to make like quick bends and stuff like that with it, like sharp bends. It'll kink real bad. So what I actually ended up doing was I kind of just scrapped that whole idea. I went and picked up these stainless quick disconnect that are 90-degree angled, and I put those down through and I welded them, and I hooked my rubber lines up underneath, and so then I grabbed a couple more quick disconnect female ends. So I'm just going to use those and run those down to my fuel filter. That should work out pretty good. Slide your clamp on, push your fitting into the line like that. Move your crimps. Crimp the line. Hook it up, you're ready to go. So I was going to go ahead and mount my remote oil filter on the frame because we don't really have a lot of room under there for an oil filter on the pan. So I was going to just run a remote oil filter, run my lines over you know, about a foot from the oil pan on the frame rail. But it turns out these are NPT female fittings and these are AN. This is 10 AN and they don't work obviously. So I ordered a couple of these same style fittings but with a NPT, half-inch NPT on this end. So hopefully they should be here in a couple days and we can get that mounted. But for now, I want to go ahead and get this radiator core support off and get the new one on so that we can mount our radiator, and then we can figure out what I'm gonna do for radiator hoses. I don't know if I'm gonna make them or if I can piece some together or even find some radiator hoses that are kind of bent the right way and we can cut them and make them work. So let's go ahead and do that now. Alright, so I don't know if I mentioned in the other video, but the reason I wanted to replace this core support is because this thing was in some sort of a light front end collision on this driver's front corner, and they did a decent job straightening this out. But when they replaced the core support, I don't know who welded it, but they just did a terrible job. It was like they used like a flux core welder. None of the welds were real good. So I wanted to get this thing off. I literally picked up a core support for like 50 bucks. They're really cheap. So I wanted to get that off, and you know, plus it was all rusty and it just looked like crap. So I wanted to get it off, clean this all up, and really get a nice weld so that I have a nice sturdy core support. So I can weld my radiator to it, you know, weld my brackets and stuff like that, and it'll just look a lot better once I get it painted and everything. But so now that we got that off, let's go ahead and clean this up, clean up our fender aprons, and get the new one kind of mocked up so we can mark our holes so we can do all of our spot welds. So we got the rad support welded on. I threw on a little bit of primer just over some of my welds, some of the bare metal to keep it from rusting. So what I want to do now is get our radiator mounted up. I did buy some just aftermarket, some universal radiator mounts. Was kind of hoping that I could just make these work somehow. But we're gonna have to kind of see as we go here. So let's go ahead and get the radiator mocked up and see if we can find a way to use those mounts somehow on this setup. All right, got our radiator mounted up, and all I did was I used the mounts that I bought, and I just had to, I actually got, these mounts were a little bit too wide for this radiator. I thought I ordered the same width mount as the radiator, but I guess I didn't. So, but it kind of worked out because down here I was able to extend these mounts out and weld them to the radiator core support, and I just used some like 3/4 inch bar here across and welded that in place to kind of, and then I used, there's some foam like 3M type tape that acts as like an insulator so that the radiator is not just metal on metal down here. And then up here I kind of did the same thing. I cut these ones and made them a little bit shorter and welded them back into place and bolted them to the core support. That way if I want to remove the radiator, I can do that pretty easily. And we also got our electric fan installed, and we've got about a 1/2 inch of clearance here between the radiator motor and the bell of the water pump. So at this point, all I really have to do to finish the cooling system is I got to get some coolant hoses, or some radiator hoses that'll work here. I don't really have a lot of room to work, so I haven't decided if I'm going to try and piece some hoses together, or I may order up some like the corrugated, like flexible radiator hose, see how that works out. And other than that, I have to run my steam vent. I have to figure out a place to put that. I've seen guys, you know, drill and tap the water pump and run it to there, or drill and tap the radiator, run it to there. I don't want to use this port because I want to run a overflow reservoir, which I still have to do that. But other than that, the cooling system is pretty much done. So at this point, once I get my intake piping done, get my mass airflow wired in, I have to wire in my starter. So I have to run a like a heavy gauge wire down to the starter motor and run my solenoid wire down. And I think at that point, I'll be able to start this thing. I still have to figure out my power steering lines. I have to build those, and I have to figure out, I should probably, before I start, I should probably get my clutch pedal mounted, get my shifter mounted. So I'll probably work on that this coming weekend. But once I get all that stuff done, I should be able to get this thing started. I still have to install a base tune. Probably increase the idle speed a little bit so I can at least get it running. And I can actually start tuning it. But that should be about it. And I should be able to have this thing running here pretty soon. So that's going to be it for today, guys. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. I will catch you next time. Peace.